BC Cancer Agency. So just out of curiosity, how many patients have gone through her DAPPER program? Oh, good. So there's still some of you who could be eligible to come. So what Eleah is going to be speaking about is the DAPPER program, which is a nutritional program, specifically for prostate cancer patients. So with further ado, we get a round of applause for Eleah.
Hello everyone, it's so nice to be back here, so thank you for having me. My name is Eleah Stringer, and I see some familiar faces out here in the crowd, so that's nice. But for those who I haven't met personally, I am a registered dietitian at the BC Cancer Agency, and I'm currently working with the Island Prostate Centre to roll out this Diet and Prostate Program Evaluation and Recommendation Study, which is perhaps better heard of as the DAPPER study. So we are now halfway through the study, so what I'm here to do today is just give you a bit of an update on our progress to date. So for starters, as Sean just asked, how many of you have attended the study? Are there any others who have heard of DAPPER but haven't yet attended? Okay, by the show of hands, I would say at least half the people here have heard of DAPPER, so that's quite exciting. So what we're going to do today is just review what DAPPER is. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, we will cover the purpose of DAPPER, the background, and our goals. We'll then take a look at our timeline, what we've covered and what we have yet to do. And then we'll review some of the interim results. So this is quite fascinating. We've broken it down into some numbers so far. There's 3 themes that we're beginning to see. And we'll also look at some feedback. We'll hear from the participants themselves. And then no study is complete without a few challenges. So we'll take a look at the challenges we've experienced and some of our remaining goals. I will save some time for questions at the end as well, so if you have any, please keep those in mind. So what is DAPPER? So DAPPER provides a weekly nutrition education session for any man with prostate cancer. So you can be newly diagnosed before treatment, actively on treatment, or even years after treatment. So anyone with a prostate cancer diagnosis is welcome to attend. This is a one-time session. It's 2 hours long. It's held at 2 different locations. So we have it at the BC Cancer Agency, as well as at the Hillside Wellness Center. It's on 2 different days and 2 different times. So we're trying to make it as accommodating as possible. And the aim of this study is to examine the feasibility of providing sustainable, evidence-based nutrition group education sessions. And our primary research question is, are nutrition group education programs addressing improved treatment outcomes and survivorship feasible, sustainable, and effective in meeting the knowledge needs in men with prostate cancer living on Vancouver Island? So why are we running this? A high BMI is associated with a higher reoccurrence rate after radical prostatectomies and undergoing radiation therapy. So this suggests that obesity may influence prostate cancer aggressiveness and progression. And one thing we do know is that ADT, so androgen deprivation therapy, may increase the risk of obesity and other comorbidities, such as heart disease and diabetes. And what the research has shown us so far is that men with prostate cancer, they prefer a tailored approach to their nutrition information. They haven't been satisfied with being given that pamphlet from the oncologist that just has a few general nutrition facts on that. They want some tailored info that's going to be pertinent to them. So our goals, and this is taken right from our research proposal, is to establish a weekly nutrition and prostate group education program at Vancouver Island Centre and the Island Prostate Centre, to understand the needs, both met and unmet, for diet and prostate information, to work collaboratively with the local Island Prostate Centre and Healthline BC. And our last goal is to contribute to the evidence and understanding the need for nutrition education in this population. So our timeline. This study is running over 2016. So it started in January and it's ending in December. So before receiving our funding in January, we did start applying to the REB, so the ethics board, to ensure that the study is done in an ethical manner. And then when the funding was approved in January, we began with our literature review. We then updated and created our teaching materials, and we developed our pre and post survey. We then started developing and distributing our marketing materials. And I should mention that that's an ongoing process. We're continually getting the marketing materials out there and continuing to work on approval. Our original plan was to begin the classes at the beginning of March, but the first class actually didn't take place until April 4th. And the reason for that was our preparation stage took a bit longer than planned, and we didn't get our final REB approval until the end of March. So come April, the classes began. And once the classes started, we then began collecting our data and organizing our data. So this is where we're currently at. I'm now actively working on preparing and submitting our progress report. So that's what you're going to see now, is just a snippet of what that progress report is going to show. And that final report will be submitted to the Prostate Center at the end of this month. So classes are continuing on until the end of October. So for anyone in the room here who's still interested in taking a class, we have many more opportunities to attend. And if you're away over the summer or you're on holidays or it's just not working for you, we will still have some taking place in the fall as well. So for any of you who haven't attended, do still have some time. Once the classes finish up at the end of October, we'll then begin the data analysis. And once that's completed, we will write and submit our report. We're also hoping to publish in a peer-reviewed journal. So we do still have a few steps ahead of us, and we're right smack dab in the middle of our timeline right now. So let's take a look at the numbers that we've had so far. So far we've had a total of 21 participants attend over 7 sessions. And these participants are the men. We have had, I would say, a third of the men are bringing a wife or a support person along with them. But in terms of our statistics, it's just the men who are counting here. And we are very pleased to report that we've had an excellent completion rate. So what this is these are the participants that filled out their pre-session survey, they attended the education session, and then they also submitted their post-session survey. So in study designs like this, where there's a time lapse between the intervention, which is our class, and then the last data analysis point, which is collecting that survey, there's always a risk of someone falling off. And the goal in research is usually to have a completion rate of about 60%. 80% is considered a high completion rate. And here we are with 95. So that's excellent. There's many peer-reviewed journals now that will only accept articles that have a completion rate of 80% or higher. So keeping this 95% is a huge feather in our hat when it comes time to try to publish at the end. So thank you to those of you who have gotten me back your surveys. It's greatly appreciated. So here's our numbers for the month of April only. I'm only looking at April because I'm still in the process of collecting back some surveys for our May. But if you look at April, we had 13 men attending, and that was over 3 classes. And if we're looking at the knowledge that they had in their pre-session survey, compared to the knowledge that they demonstrated in the post-session survey, we saw an average increase in knowledge of 13.7%. And this may not sound like a huge number, but this is actually getting 12 more questions correct on the post-session survey. So that's quite significant when you're thinking of that. The median number was 13 and the mean was 11.
Sorry, what? The knowledge of what?
Oh, so what we are doing is where there's a pre-session survey, and it just has a variety of nutrition questions. So it's testing just general nutrition knowledge. And then you attend the session where we're going to go over lots of the material that will be in that study. And then you get the same survey at the end. So we're just comparing the results of the before and the after survey. Thank you, that was a good question. So along with the numbers, at the very end of these surveys, there's quite a few opportunities to express your feelings and thoughts, either towards your diagnosis, towards DAPPER, any nutrition or diet concerns that you've had. And it's been really neat to see because I've had large responses. Some people have just written a few sentences, but quite a few men have taken the time to fill out full pages, so I've gotten tons of feedback. And in doing that, there's 3 themes that very quickly emerged. So the first thing that I began to see was the benefit of small groups. We were hoping to have 10 men attend every session, when in fact we've only had about 2 to 4 men per session, with 1 to 3 wives attending. And though this isn't great for our statistics, there was an unexpected benefit. And that's that the men were commenting, and when they're in a large group, sometimes they don't always feel heard. It's more difficult to communicate and to have conversations with each other and with the facilitator in a large group. So the men have loved the fact that it's been a small group. It's allowed rapport to be built between myself and the men, and between the men. So they were able to learn from each other, and the richness of conversation that came from it, I think, was much more than what we would see in a large group. The second theme, there's so much information. So in preparing the study, I was aware that this session was going to be information loaded. And the reason for that is the survey that we used is one of the very few validated nutrition tools that are out there. And in order to produce high-quality research, we want to use a validated tool. But in order to keep that survey being validated, I'm not able to pick and choose the questions that I want. So all of the questions need to be included in that survey. And it's not fair of me to expect you to know answers if I don't teach you anything about that material. So as a result, I've thrown in quite a large amount of material, but that way it gives you answers to the questions. And every participant gets what I call the blue workbook. So this here is going to give you many more resources that you can turn to. So if there's ever any subject material that we only brush over in the class, you'll have the opportunity to go back home and read up on it in more detail. So I'm careful to say that there's only so much information and not necessarily too much information. Feedback on this has been polarized. A few men have said they love the fact that it's jam-packed because they're able to go home with their blue folder and now they can do more research on their own. They like the fact that they get a general overview and now they know where to go. Some other people, though, have commented that they think it's a bit overwhelming. So one quote was, "It's hard to absorb all of that in 2 hours." A few men have suggested the idea of having a follow-up session. They wanted to be able to take the blue folder home, review some of the material, think it over, digest it, and then come back with their new questions. I thought this might enhance the learning a bit. So again, I'm careful to say so much information and not necessarily too much. Last thing is the perceived value in DAPPER. So as I mentioned earlier, one of our goals was to assess the sustainability and feasibility of carrying out DAPPER long term. And it was very quickly apparent from the feedback that men are seeing high value in this session. Some of the men afterwards are asking me for extra brochures because they're wanting to take it home to their friends and the family because they want all of their caring loved ones to have the best nutrition tools so they can help plan for a healthy future. There's been a few men too that have said to me, "Where were you 2 years ago when I was on treatment? I really needed that information then." One man even commented that he thinks these classes should be mandatory for every man with prostate cancer. So though there's a lot of resources and time that goes into starting up a new program, I strongly feel, and I think those who have participated would agree, that there's high value here that outweighs the cost. So let's look at some of the feedback. Let's hear directly from the horse's mouth. What kind of things are people saying? So these are quotes that I got from the post-survey. So one of them, "I enjoyed the study. It was well designed and presented. I think working with a dietitian should be included in prostate cancer treatment protocols. It should be mandatory for all patients. I observed the various questions fielded to her like a real pro. She immediately answered with no hesitation. I learned a lot from her session. The information gained from the study is fundamental to all that follows. The DAPPER study was informative and indicated what to look for. I felt it was very worthwhile. And I think that word worthwhile is one that comes through quite consistently. I also asked, what did you like best about the class? And here's a few of the responses. It was friendly and knowledgeable. The explanation was in layman terms. How to manage my diet to my personal needs. The presenter's knowledge. They liked that it was a small group interacting with the instructor. A good overview with backup sources provided. And it was a relaxed atmosphere. So though there's been so many good things that have come from DAPPER so far, we certainly have had a few challenges. Our main challenge has been accrual. At the BC Cancer Agency, we have not been providing nutrition services for men with prostate cancer for some time now. So I'm heavily reliant on our frontline staff, mainly our radiation therapists, our nurses, and our oncologists, to provide some referrals. And when they're not used to referring, it takes a little bit to make that habitual. Also, our sessions are all running during weekdays, during work hours, and only in Victoria. And when we here are servicing all of Vancouver Island, you can imagine that that would be a barrier for quite a few men. We have had interest expressed by men who live up island, but unfortunately there just is too large of a barrier to come down to Victoria. So should this program continue long term, this is something I would love to revisit, and hopefully we would be able to have some type of teleconferencing or a video link. But due to the constraints of the study, at this time it's only here in Victoria. And when we were planning the study, we were hoping to have about 4 volunteers help with running the sessions and help with some of the administrative duties. So some of the photocopying and advertising, keeping track of emails and whatnot. And to date, I have 1 volunteer who's been excellent, and she helps with the sessions that run at the BC Cancer Agency. But that leaves a lot of the other administrative duties on me, which is taking up quite a bit of time. A challenge that we weren't expecting to run into is having stand-ins at the session. And what I mean by this is a support person is always welcome to attend with any man. But we have had twice now wives attending on behalf of the man. So the first time this happened, I took this back to the team and said, what do you guys think? Because they finished, or they did their pre-survey, they did the post-survey as well, stayed for the full session, so we had lots of great data there. So I took it back to the team and said, what do you guys think? So we discussed it, and we also went back to the ethics. And because we have strict inclusion and exclusion criteria, unfortunately we were not able to include that in our data point. So only the men attending are able to be included in our data. And our last challenge was our lack of external sponsors. Though we are very grateful for the funding that we did receive, that is going a very long way. We thought we would have a few sponsors to help fund some of the food that's provided at the sessions. And we also had an idea of creating a comprehensive workbook. So instead of having a blue folder that has quite a few handles in it, ideally we would love to create a single book that will be a bit easier to navigate. But unfortunately we just didn't have the funds to do so. Luckily, the blue folder is still come in handy. So considering our challenges and where we're at right now, we have a few remaining goals. Our first one, and our main one, is to increase accrual to 60%. So we want to see a minimum of 6 men attending every single session. We're looking to obtain a volunteer for data management. And we're currently in the process of determining the best method for data analysis to ensure that we have a database that will be useful for future projects as well. And lastly, we're always looking at ways to ensure that this program is sustainable. We really want to see it continue on. All right, so we've heard quite a bit from me and what I think about DAPPER. I know we have a few people in the crowd who have attended, and I want to give you the opportunity to say a word or two if you're interested. I'm certainly not going to put anyone on the spot, but if anyone would like to speak to their experience, I certainly welcome you to come up here or speak from your chair.
I attended. I found the time flew by, the information was tremendous, and I was more impressed with your knowledge. I was playing a bit of a devil's advocate because I was watching who was asking, and people were asking questions that I'd never have thought of. and I thought the bit about the duck's egg, if you remember back, and that guy said, well, what about the duck's egg? And you just went, oh, so. And I thought, wow. But the information that you get is well worth going. I would do it again, because I was one of them that said, it's a pity we can't have a follow-up. But all my thanks is to you, and I've learnt a lot.
Good, well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much for attending as well. Is there anyone else who would like to say a word?
I attended, my husband couldn't go that day, he wasn't feeling well enough. And we're certainly eating more Brazil nuts now than ever before.
Yes, I certainly will have a few Brazil nuts at the session.
So we stopped our supplements, but the Brazil nuts are in a jar ready for breakfast. And I also wanted to say, I don't know whether I heard it through the actual session or from somewhere else later. There's some country in Africa where they eat a lot of Brazil nuts and nobody gets cancer there. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because selenium is one nutrient that varies there has a huge variation depending on where you are in the world. Our source of selenium largely comes from the soil. Some areas are rich in selenium and some are deficient. So I have heard of the fact Africa is one that is very rich in selenium, almost in all of Africa. So just any food that is grown, any plant-based food in Africa is going to be quite high in selenium. Whereas some other areas that are dependent on only eating the foods from their local area, if their area is low in selenium, they will be lower. Here in Victoria, it's very rare to find anybody low in selenium. On the island, our soil is not rich in selenium. However, nobody eats a diet of food that's only being grown here on the island. We're eating bananas, we're eating things that are imported from all over the place. So it's rare to find someone who's deficient in selenium. However, your single Brazil nut will contain your daily amount of selenium. So if you want to be sure, supplement with that Brazil nut. So great, I'm glad to hear that you found some practical strategies and solutions from that class. Yeah. Anyone else?
What effect does the Brazil nut have on existing cancer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we'll talk a little bit about the role of selenium in prostate cancer in the study. So if you're interested in attending, we'll certainly go into a bit more depth on the role there. So lastly, for anyone who is interested in attending, I do have a sign-up sheet at the back table there. If you want a bit more information before committing yourself, there's also an information package. So please feel free to take that home with you. You can read over the details of the study and take a look at the consent form so you know exactly what you're participating in before you sign up. And then you can either call or email me to register. Again, the sessions are on Mondays or Tuesdays. Any questions at all? Yeah.
Well, Gary here attended and he told me how valuable it was and how much he enjoyed it. So I've signed up for July and I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. No questions? All right. Well, thank you again for having me back, and I hope to see you guys soon in one of the sessions.